Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. I've lived in my condo for about 3 years now. It's in a decent complex, not fancy but well-maintained with reasonable HOA fees. When I first moved in, everything was fine. The neighbors were friendly, the rules were sensible, and life was good. That all changed when the HOA board elections happened last year. Our old HOA president retired and moved to Florida, and that's when Karen swooped in to take over. She'd been on the board for years, apparently just waiting for her moment to seize power. From day one of her presidency, it was like living under a dictator. Suddenly, every tiny rule in the HOA handbook was being enforced with religious zeal. People were getting violation notices for having a flower pot the wrong shade of terracotta. It was ridiculous. But I kept my head down. I'm not one for confrontation, and honestly, I'm not home much anyway because of my work schedule. I figured as long as I followed the basic rules, I'd stay off Karen's radar. Then I bought my electric car. I'd been saving up for years to make the switch. Gas prices were killing me, and I wanted to do my part for the environment. After months of research, I finally pulled the trigger on a nice mid-range electric vehicle. Nothing flashy or expensive, just practical. I was so proud of it when I drove it home that first day. I parked it in my assigned garage spot, just like I'd done with my old gas car for the past 3 years. The condo I bought came with a dedicated garage space that I own as part of my property deed. It's not shared or communal, it's mine, and I have the paperwork to prove it. The next morning, I woke up early to head to work. I grabbed my coffee, headed down to the garage, and my car was gone. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. Did I park somewhere else and forget? No, impossible. Then the horrible realization hit me. My car had been towed. But why? I was parked in my own garage space. I immediately called our property management company, and the conversation went something like this. Hi, this is Unit 207. My car's been towed from my own garage space, and I need to know why. The property manager sounded uncomfortable. Oh yes, there was a report that you were violating the HOA vehicle storage policy. What violation? It's my assigned space. Well, according to the report submitted by the board president, only conventional vehicles are permitted in the garages. Your electric vehicle apparently doesn't comply with the regulations. I was dumbfounded. That's not a real rule. Where does it say that in the HOA handbook? I believe the board president referenced Section 8.3 regarding approved vehicles. I hung up and immediately pulled out my copy of the HOA handbook. Section 8.3 said nothing about electric vehicles being prohibited. It only specified that no commercial vehicles, boats, RVs, or non-operational vehicles could be stored in garage spaces. My car didn't fall into any of those categories. I got the information for the towing company and called an Uber to take me there. The towing fee was $275 plus a $50 after-hours release fee even though it was 8 a.m. I was fuming but paid it because I needed my car for work. When I arrived at my office, I was still so angry I could barely focus. During my lunch break, I emailed the HOA board asking for clarification on the rule that prohibited electric vehicles. I attached a copy of the relevant handbook section and requested an immediate response. About an hour later, I got an email from Karen herself. As HOA president, it is my duty to ensure all residents comply with community standards. The handbook specifies that only approved vehicles may be stored in garages. Electric vehicles were not specifically approved when the handbook was written, and therefore, they are not permitted. Additionally, the charging of electric vehicles poses a fire hazard and increases utility costs for the entire complex. This was complete nonsense. The handbook didn't have an approved list of vehicles, it only had a list of what was not allowed, and my car didn't require any communal electricity. I had paid to have a charging station installed in my own garage connected to my personal electric meter. I emailed back politely explaining these facts and requesting a refund for my towing fees. Karen's response was quick and dismissive. The board's interpretation of the rules is final. If you wish to appeal the decision, you may do so at the next board meeting in 30 days. Until then, you may not park your electric vehicle in the garage. Any further violations will result in additional towing at your expense. Now, I was stuck. I needed to park my car somewhere, but according to Karen, I couldn't use my own garage that I paid for. I ended up having to park on the street several blocks away, where there was free overnight parking. Every morning and evening, I had to walk this distance, which was especially unpleasant when it rained. During this time, I started doing some research and networking. I talked to other residents in the complex and discovered I wasn't the only one suffering under Karen's reign. She'd been on a power trip for months, harassing residents over the most minor infractions. One neighbor had been fined for having a doormat that was 1 inch larger than the approved size. Another got a violation for having their blinds open after 9 p.m. because it disrupted community aesthetics. It was insane. I also learned that Karen drove a massive gas-guzzling luxury SUV and frequently complained about those electric car people thinking they're better than everyone else. This wasn't about rules, it was personal. The next weekend, I decided to take action. First, I reviewed our HOA articles of incorporation and bylaws. Not just the handbook, but the actual legal documents. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, that gave the board authority to restrict the type of car I could park in my own deeded garage space. I also discovered something interesting. Our HOA had a rule that board members couldn't use their position to target specific residents or enforce rules selectively. Yet there were at least 3 other residents with hybrid vehicles parking in their garages without issue. Karen was only going after me. Armed with this information, I decided to attend the next HOA board meeting. I prepared carefully, bringing copies of all relevant documents, photos of other hybrid electric vehicles in the garage, and a detailed timeline of events. The meeting was held in our community clubhouse, and about 20 residents showed up, more than usual as I had quietly spread the word about what was happening. Karen looked surprised when she saw the turnout. When it came time for resident comments, I stood up and calmly explained my situation. I presented evidence that, 1. The HOA rules did not prohibit electric vehicles. 2. My car was parked in my own deeded property, not a communal space. 3. The charging station was installed professionally and connected to my own electric meter. 4. Other residents with hybrid vehicles were not being targeted. 5. The towing of my vehicle was unauthorized and illegal. As I spoke, I could see other residents nodding in agreement. Even a couple of the other board members looked uncomfortable. When I finished, Karen immediately jumped in. The board has the authority to interpret the rules as written, and we've determined that electric vehicles pose a safety hazard. The matter is closed. But one of the other board members, an older gentleman named Richard, who had been on the board for years, cleared his throat. Actually, I'm not aware of the board ever having a formal discussion or vote on this matter. When exactly did we make this determination? Karen looked flustered. It's implied in the existing rules. Another resident stood up. I've had a hybrid car in my garage for 2 years with no issues. Why is his car suddenly a problem? The meeting quickly turned into a public examination of Karen's behavior. Multiple residents stood up to share their experiences with her selective enforcement and harassment. The other board members seemed genuinely shocked at some of the stories. Richard finally said, I think we need to call an emergency board meeting to review these issues. In the meantime, I move that we immediately rescind any restriction on electric vehicles in personally owned garage spaces, as there is no basis for such a restriction in our governing documents. Another board member seconded the motion, and despite Karen's objections, it passed 4-1. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I parked my car in my garage again. When I returned from work, there was a violation notice on my door with a $100 fine for unauthorized vehicle storage and a warning that my car would be towed again if not removed. I was livid. I took photos of the notice and immediately emailed the entire board, not just Karen. I explained what had happened and attached the violation notice, reminding them of the decision made at the previous night's meeting. Richard responded quickly, apologizing and assuring me that the fine would be rescinded. He also mentioned that the emergency board meeting had been scheduled for the following evening. But I was done playing nice. The next day, I consulted with a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. After reviewing my documents, he was confident we had a solid case for harassment and abuse of power. He drafted a formal cease and desist letter to the HOA board and to Karen personally, outlining the legal consequences if the harassment continued. I also filed a police report about the illegal towing of my vehicle from my private property, providing them with all the documentation showing that I owned the garage space and that there was no rule prohibiting my type of vehicle. The emergency board meeting was tense. Karen walked in with her own lawyer, looking smug until she realized nearly half the complex's residents had shown up to support me. I presented my case again, this time including the police report and the cease and desist letter from my attorney. The other board members were clearly concerned about potential legal liability. After a heated discussion, they voted for 1. Karen being the only dissenter. 2-1. Formally clarify that electric vehicles are permitted in privately owned garage spaces. 2. Refund my towing and legal fees in full. 3. Launch an investigation into Karen's conduct as board president. Karen stormed out of the meeting, but her reign of terror wasn't over yet. The next day, I came home to find my garage door had been superglued shut. A security camera that a sympathetic neighbor had installed captured Karen in the act, wearing sunglasses and a hat as a poor attempt at a disguise. I called the police again, and this time they took the matter very seriously. They arrested Karen for vandalism and criminal mischief. When they searched her purse, they found a set of copied garage door openers for various units in the complex, including mine, which she had apparently obtained from the property management company by claiming they were needed for emergency access. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community. An emergency meeting of all residents was called, and Karen was unanimously removed from the board. Richard was appointed as interim president until proper elections could be held. In the aftermath, I learned that Karen had been using her position to bully and harass residents who she personally disliked for various reasons. My electric car was just the latest excuse. The management company also admitted that they had been intimidated by her and had never verified her authority to order towings or access garage openers. The HOA insurance ended up covering the damages to my garage door, the towing fees, and my legal expenses. Karen was charged with multiple crimes, including vandalism, theft, and unauthorized access to private property. As for me, I now park my electric car proudly in my garage every day. The HOA actually updated their rules to explicitly protect residents' rights to own alternative fuel vehicles and install charging stations. The best part? At the next board election, I was elected to the HOA board myself. My platform was simple: fairness, transparency, and respect for all residents. My first act was to propose a new set of guidelines for rule enforcement that required documentation and board approval before any punitive action could be taken against residents. Oh, and Karen's massive SUV? It got repossessed about a month after all this went down. Apparently she'd been using HOA funds to make her car payments. The audit initiated after her removal uncovered multiple financial irregularities that were turned over to the police. I never thought I'd get involved in HOA politics, but sometimes you have to stand up for what's right. Now our complex is a much more pleasant place to live, and several other residents have been inspired to make the switch to electric vehicles. There's even talk of installing communal charging stations in the visitor parking area. It's amazing what a little resistance to tyranny can accomplish. Update. 1 year later. It's been a full year since the whole electric car fiasco with Karen, and I wanted to share what's happened since then. Grab a drink and settle in because a lot has gone down. First, the legal stuff. Karen's case finally worked its way through the courts. She tried to play the victim, claiming she was just enforcing the rules as she understood them. The judge wasn't buying it. The prosecutor had a field day with the evidence, especially the security footage of her vandalizing my garage and the copied garage door openers found in her purse. The DA ended up charging her with criminal mischief, vandalism, unauthorized access to private property, and the big one, embezzlement of HOA funds. Turns out she'd been stealing from our reserve fund for over 2 years. The forensic accountant found she had taken over $43,000, way more than we initially thought. Karen's lawyer tried to get her a plea deal, but when she showed up to court with a new designer handbag and acted entitled during the hearing, the judge lost all sympathy. She was sentenced to 30 days in county jail, which she actually had to serve, 3 years probation, 400 hours of community service, and full restitution of all stolen funds plus our legal fees. I was in the courtroom when the sentence was handed down. Karen looked completely shocked, like it never occurred to her that she'd face actual consequences. She tried to argue with the judge about how jail would ruin her reputation. The judge just replied, "Your actions ruined your reputation, not this sentence." The day she was taken into custody was honestly a relief for everyone in our community. One of my neighbors actually brought champagne to the clubhouse that night. But here's where it gets really interesting. The investigation into Karen's finances uncovered that our property management company had been complicit in her schemes. They had been approving her fraudulent reimbursement requests without verification and losing complaints filed against her by residents. We fired them immediately and filed a lawsuit against both the company and its regional manager. It turned out we weren't the only HOA they were helping to scam. 3 other communities in our area had similar issues. The case turned into a class action lawsuit. Last month, we received our settlement, $150,000 to our HOA, plus a full refund of 2 years' worth of management fees. We're using that money to repair our community pool, upgrade the clubhouse, and fund our reserve for future maintenance needs. As for our day-to-day community life, it's completely transformed. After I was elected to the board, we held an emergency meeting to overhaul our approach to governance. We, rewrote the HOA handbook to be clear, fair, and actually make sense, too. Created a transparent violation process with multiple reviews before any fines, 3. Formed a resident committee to handle disputes, 4. Cut unnecessary rules that only existed to give power trippers like Karen something to enforce. Richard, the older gentleman who first stood up for me at that meeting, is now our HOA president. He's been amazing. Fair, reasonable, and always willing to listen. At our monthly meetings, residents actually show up now because they feel heard and respected. Remember my initial plan to install communal charging stations? Well, we made it happen. We used part of our settlement money to install 4 charging points in the visitor parking area. Residents can use them for free, and visitors pay a small fee. That fee is actually generating revenue for the HOA, about $500 a month, which we're putting toward other green initiatives. The charging stations have been so popular that 5 more residents have purchased electric or hybrid vehicles in the past year. We're becoming known as the green community in our area, which has actually increased our property values by about 8%, according to a recent appraisal. I've personally been approached by 3 neighboring HOA to consult on their governance structures. I never thought I'd become an HOA reform advocate, but here we are. I've even started a local group called Fair Housing Communities that helps residents deal with overreaching boards. We meet monthly, and I've helped 2 other communities completely rewrite their bylaws. Last month, I got invited to speak at a statewide HOA management conference about our transformation. The room was packed, and afterward, at least 20 property managers asked for my contact information. It feels good knowing our nightmare might help prevent similar situations elsewhere. Oh, and Karen's house? It sat empty for months after she went to jail. The bank finally foreclosed on it. Guess those missed SUV payments were just the tip of her financial iceberg. The new owners are a young family who moved in last month. The dad works for a solar panel company, and they've already installed panels on their roof. They also drive, you guessed it, an electric car. The irony is just too perfect. The dad, Mark, came over to introduce himself the day they moved in. I heard about what happened with the previous owner, he said. Just want you to know we're nothing like that. We specifically looked for a community with charging stations and a progressive HOA policy. That conversation really drove home how much things have changed. A year ago, I was fighting for the basic right to park my car in my own garage. Now, people are moving here because of our approach to electric vehicles and community governance. The changes haven't only been in policy, though. There's been a real shift in how neighbors treat each other. Before, people would hurry from their cars to their doors, avoiding eye contact. Now, we have community cookouts, a walking group that meets 3 times a week, and even a community garden behind the clubhouse. Last weekend, we had our first annual Community Day with food trucks, games for kids, and a showcase of green home improvements. Over 80% of residents showed up unheard of for an HOA event. I looked around at all the smiling faces and realized that standing up to Karen hadn't just solved my car problem, it had given us all our community back. As for my electric car that started this whole mess, it's running great, and I've since added a bumper sticker that reads, "Powered by Justice." A bit cheesy maybe, but it makes me smile every time I see it. Yesterday, I got an unexpected letter. It was from Karen, written as part of her making amends requirement for probation. It was clearly forced and not particularly sincere, but one line stood out. I never expected one person to be able to stand up to me so effectively. That's the lesson I want to share with anyone dealing with HOA tyrants. You can fight back and win. Document everything, know your rights, build alliances with neighbors, be persistent. The system may seem stacked against individual homeowners, but with determination and evidence, you can prevail. Karen tried to have my car towed because she thought I was an easy target who wouldn't fight back. She was wrong. Now she's served jail time, is on probation, owes tens of thousands in restitution, and has lost her home and reputation. Meanwhile, I'm driving my electric car, serving on the board, and helping transform communities throughout our region. Standing up to bullies isn't just about protecting yourself. Sometimes it's about creating the community you want to live in. I never planned to be an HOA activist, but I found purpose in helping others fight against the kind of treatment I experienced. So if you're facing your own HOA Karen, remember my story. Document everything, know your rights, build support among your neighbors, and don't back down when you're in the right. You might not just solve your own problem, you might transform your entire community. And Karen, if you're somehow reading this, I hope the jail time gave you perspective. Real leadership isn't about controlling others, it's about serving the community. That's a lesson all HOA boards should remember. The next one is a malicious compliances story. This story is not quite as detailed as my last story. It involves the same manager and department that I worked in for the last story. Manager decided that she needed to track where we were at all times. Therefore, she put up a whiteboard with all our names on it with columns for sign-out time, sign-in time, and she wanted us to put a reason why we left our desk. I am sure you probably have an idea as to where this is going. It started out simply enough. I needed to go ask someone in another department a question. We didn't have our own dedicated phones, just one phone for each department. I, like the good girl I am, put the time I walked out of the department and who I went to see. When I got back, she was waiting for me and told me quite loudly that I didn't put in why I had to go see that person and that, going forward, I needed to be more detailed in why I had to leave my desk. She made sure it was in front of the entire team. Cue my malicious compliance. I had to use the restroom, so I walked up to the board, put in the time I was leaving, and in the reason I put that I was going to the restroom and that I would be urinating and defeating while I was there. I walked out of the department and went to do my business. My manager had stepped out to attend meeting at the time. Well, little did I know that my team had my back, and they all went to the board and signed out and put that they were going to the restroom with varying detailed reasons as to what they were going to do while they were in the restroom. When I got out of the restroom, all my team members were there waiting for me. We walked back into the department together just in time to see our manager standing in front of the board with one of her peers as they had both been in the same meeting. The look on their faces was absolutely priceless. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.